Since we have a quorum, we will go ahead and call this meeting of the Civilian Review Board to order. Good afternoon, everyone. First piece of business is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Hopefully, everyone has had an opportunity to take a look at those. Did anyone have any suggestions, additions, or changes to those minutes? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept them as written.
Move.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. Perfect. And now turning it over to the Inspector General for any updates.
Good evening, everyone. I did put on everyone's, in front of you is an update that just tells you what our updates were for the complaints received. I won't necessarily go over it unless someone has questions. What I will advise the board is that we are working on a annual report as well as trying to get all of our dates and stats and everything together. So I would anticipate presenting that in February at the next board meeting that will give you all of the stats and everything as to complaints and things we receive, processes and things like that. So if there's any questions, please feel free to ask me or now, or you can ask me after the meeting.
Thank you, Inspector General. I will also note, I believe, Ms. Brock, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we might also have an update, a legal update from Mr. Furby at our February meeting as well. So some of the questions that board members have had about Fourth and Fifth Amendment issues, Mr. Furby will be able to provide us with an opportunity. I will say this, his update is fairly long. So I've asked him to send a truncated version to us, and he'll be able to answer questions that any board member has about those. But there's been a significant number of cases that have come out over the last year that impact those issues. So if you have the opportunity, once you get kind of the printed version of his update, please try to have your questions prepared ahead of time. All right, quickly, before we get to cases, I just wanted to kind of briefly give an idea of what I hope can be a formatting adjustment so that we can keep a cleaner line between our actual decisions and votes on cases versus our discussions about things that we'd like to have some more policy input on. What I hope to be able to do is have us look at our cases first. Any questions that anyone has about policy, procedure, or practice, I'd like to reserve until 4 p.m., so the last hour of our meeting together. And so that way I will take note of whatever our questions might be. And that way we can have a discussion or questions, or if there are recommendations outside of the reports themselves that we would like to make. Hopefully we can have a slightly more organized method of noting what those are. So if you'll note, if for instance someone's got a question about a Fourth Amendment issue during one of our first cases, we'd like to be able to put the report, put the recommendation on the record, and then hold that discussion until that last hour. Anybody have any questions about that? I'm hoping it can help us kind of clean up a little bit about some of our policy recommendations that we make that are in addition to some of our report outs.
One question, Sherwin.
Yes.
If there's a case that we have a question about, will we hold off voting on that, or?
I think it depends on if the answer is going to be outcome determinative.
Okay.
So if the answer to that question doesn't change what your subcommittee voted or what your personal vote would be, then I'd say we still have that discussion at the end, but it would still be part of the vote as long as it doesn't change that outcome.
Okay, I like that suggestion, by the way.
Yep. All right, turning back to cases we were not able to get through at our last meeting, is there someone from Committee 2 who's going to report out on the cases listed below, 220441 through 230890?
I guess it'll be me.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Ford.
Sure. So first we'll start with case 22-0441. This is one that had been tabled, I guess, several times. We'll come to an end here today. The summary: on October 31st, 2022, the complainant walked into the Columbus Department of Inspector General and filed a complaint alleging police misconduct. The complainant explained that she witnessed the burglary at the Dollar General. When an officer responded to the scene, he told her to come here, then physically grabbed her. The complainant informed the officer that she was not who he was looking for. However, she was handcuffed and placed in a cruiser. The complainant's 12-year-old son was also detained, handcuffed, and placed in a cruiser. The Columbus DIG's investigation revealed the following about the complainant's allegations. In regards to allegation 1, the actions taken by the officer grabbing the complainant by the arm were supported by CPD policy and procedures, and the officer's actions were not excessive use of force. Therefore, as they recommended, the allegation 1 be closed exonerated. In regards to allegation 2, the officer has discretion when making decisions concerning investigatory matters, and the officer's actions are supported by CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation 2 be closed exonerated. In regards to allegation 3, the officer was ordered by a sergeant to apprehend the complainant's son because at that time, CPD believed the complainant's son was involved in the burglary. An exception to the treatment of juveniles at the lowest level of control is if the involved crime is a felony, such as burglary. Also, there was no mention of the age of the violator. The actions by the officers were supported by CPT policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 3 be closed unfounded. In regards to allegation 4, the description aired by the dispatcher matched the physical description, direction of travel, and relative time frame of the burglary as it relates to the complainant when the officers responded to the scene. The actions by the officers were supported by CPD policy and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 4 against the officer be closed unfounded. Therefore, the conclusion we based on committee number 2, based on the above information from the Columbus DIG, allegation number 1, BWC footage showed that the complainant was detained, and when the complainant tried to explain that she was not the suspect burglar, she resisted. Officer S and the complainant talked until she submitted to being handcuffed upon arrival of the sergeant. The force she used for the detention was not excessive and would be considered a level 0. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation number 1 be closed exonerated, as the officer's actions were supported by CPD policy and procedures, and the officer's action was not an excessive use of force. For allegation number 2, Officer S had reasonable suspicion to approach and detain the complainant based on location, the immediacy, and a description in which no age was mentioned. Officer S does have the discretion to handle the contact as safely as he feels fit. Per CPT Directive 7.02, number 2, Policy Statement D1, which states in part, division personnel shall have limited discretion in the performance of their duties. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 2 be closed exonerated. Allegation 3, CPD Directive 3.04, Policy Statement 3D1, states, unless otherwise directed by supervisor, sworn personnel shall take the lowest level of appropriate enforcement action available from reasonable alternatives followed by law. Factors to consider include the nature and circumstances of the offense, the age of the offender's record, and the likelihood of recurrence. Officer M, who's directed by Sergeant S to get the one that's running, Sergeant S also referred to the runner as a male and gave a description. Officer M's BWC footage indicated that he believed the person he apprehended to be a female and was concerned that person was involved in the burglary. Officer M's actions indicated that he believed the person he apprehended by the order of Sergeant S was involved in the burglary, and his actions of handcuffing the son was then within policy and procedures when confronting a suspected felon. There was no indication of the age of the burglar when the run was dispatched. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 3 also be closed unfounded. Finally, allegation 4, the Columbus DIG determined that the suspect's description was aired as a female black, maroon jacket, dark shorts. Miss R is a female black wearing maroon jacket and sweatpants. The BWC footage indicated the officer's actions were based on aired information. Since Miss R met the majority of the description, was in the immediate area of the burglary, the stop was based on profiling but not bias-based profiling, which is explained in CPD Directive 3.07b. Profiling in and of itself is not inappropriate when used legally and for legitimate law enforcement purpose. However, bias-based profiling illegally infringes on the rights of others and will not be tolerated by the division. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 4 against Officer S be closed unfounded. Our committee has reviewed this case, and I move that we accept the findings of the DIG.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, any questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Ford. You can go on with your next.
This next case is 2023-0816. On June 20th, 2023, Department Inspector General received a complaint of police misconduct. The complainant alleged that she placed a call for service to respond to her brother being, quote, bashed in the head, end quote, with a firearm by someone from the, quote, drug house next door. The complainant alleged when police officers arrived to her residence, officers asked her by her first name, which placed her life in jeopardy. After review, the evidence obtained, consisted of body-worn camera video, computer-aided dispatch report, unit history, and interview with the complainant, interview with involved officers, and a review of the police policies and procedures. The investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. The conclusion is allegation number 1, Officer H and Officer D. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that Officer H or Officer D reveal the complainant's name as a reporting source. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed, finding of unfounded. And our committee has reviewed this case as well, and I move to accept the findings of the DIG.
Okay, may I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Next case is case number 2023-0819. On June 20th, 2023, the Columbus Department Inspector General received a complaint of police misconduct via the Columbus DIG hotline. The complainant alleged, number 1, the officer pulled her over due to how her car looked. Number 2, she was patted down by a male officer even though a female officer was present. And number 3, that her car was searched without a search warrant. The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of a review of a body-worn camera, computer-aided dispatch, unit history, interview with the complainant, and interview with officers. The investigation revealed that the officer initiated a traffic stop due to an equipment violation, which the officer informed the complainant the reasoning for being pulled over. The investigation also revealed the complainant did not have a valid driver's license, had expired tags, and the vehicle was registered in her name. The officer followed Columbus Police Division policy and procedures during the traffic stop. There is not any evidence to substantiate the complainant was pulled over due to how her vehicle looked, nor was a search executed on the vehicle. Therefore, it is recommended this case is closed with the finding of unfounded for allegation 1 and 3. The officer conducted a pat-down on the complainant that was within CPD policy and procedure. Therefore, allegation 2 should be closed with the finding of exonerated. So conclusions, allegation number 1, Officer P. The complainant alleged the officer pulled her over due to how her car looked. The investigation revealed Officer D initiated the traffic stop due to non-working brake lights, which was communicated with the complainant. Officer D operated within policy to pull the complainant over for this equipment violation. Therefore, it is recommended his allegation is closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation number 2, Officer P. The complainant alleged she was patted down by a male officer even though a female officer was present. The investigation revealed Officer D has the capability to complete a pat-down as part of CPD policy and procedures as the complainant was being detained due to not having a driver's license, having expired tags, and the vehicle being registered to her name. Therefore, as recommended, this allegation is closed with the finding of exonerated. Finally, allegation number 3, Officer P. The complainant alleged that her car was searched without a search warrant. The investigation revealed the complainant's vehicle had to be impounded due to operating the vehicle without a valid driver's license, the vehicle being registered her name and having expired tags. An inventory of the complainant's vehicle was taken as this is policy for when a vehicle is impounded to ensure all the individual's items are accounted for and to allow any items to be removed as necessary prior to the car being impounded. It is not accurate that the vehicle was searched, whereas an inventory is simply done as part of the policy. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation is closed with the finding of unfounded. And our committee has reviewed this case as well, and I move to accept the findings of the DIG.
Any seconds?
I had a question. What is the policy of male pat-downs of females? Do they have to, does a citizen have to request a female officer to pat her down? What is the, can she be informed that she has a right to be patted down by a female, or is there a reasonable time period for a female officer to be brought to the scene? What is the policy?
I got that question. Pastor Nathan, do you think that that'll change the outcome of any vote you have on this?
It might, if we're saying that, because one of the allegations is that it was a wrongful pat down.
And I will ask the AG, you all found no violation of the actual policy itself, correct, for this case?
Correct.
And so I think we've had the issue of male-female pat-downs come up before. I need to go back and look and see if we actually made a recommendation about that. I think that our recommendation was related specifically to unclothed persons who were subjected to arrest. So I think as the policy stands now, nothing that was done violated it. But I think we can have a discussion about whether we think that there should be a recommendation that that
I was just-
policy change.
I was asking whether there is currently a policy.
The current CPD policy does not dictate that an officer, if they are making an arrest or detaining an individual, they are able to do which is just a pat down of the outer clothes for weapons.
There's a female officer present. There isn't any policy at all guiding the pat-downs?
There's no policy that specifically states that when an officer is arresting or detaining an individual, that they have to have another officer of that specific sex pat an individual down.
Any other questions? And may I have a second, because we don't have a second yet on that. Thank you. All right, Dr. Ford.
Okay, this is case number 2023-0879. On June 30th, 2023, the Department Inspector General received a complaint from the complainant. The complainant alleged, number one, on June 22nd, 2023, while he was in his vehicle, officers arrived, pulled him out, and threw him to the ground. The complainant alleged, number two, 5 units hit his vehicle, causing damage by pushing his vehicle into his neighbor's garage, breaking the door. The Columbus DIG investigation consists of a review of body-worn camera footage, the computer dispatch reports, officer statements, and the Columbus Division of Police policies and procedures. The investigation to allegation 1 revealed that officers ordered the complainant to get out of the truck. The complainant did not comply with the officer's orders. An officer used a level 1 use of force technique to remove the complainant from his vehicle and physically placed him to the ground. The officer's actions did not violate any CPD policies, procedures, and/or laws. Therefore, his recommendation in allegation 1 be closed with finding exonerated against the officer. Also, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate allegation number 2 by the complainant that 5 units hit his vehicle, causing damage by pushing his vehicle in his neighbor's garage door. The traffic crash report shows that while the complainant was backing out of the rear of the property, the complainant struck the garage door, causing damage to the door. The complainant was cited for driving without a valid driver's license and improper starting and backing. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation number 2 be closed with a finding of unfounded. Additionally, after review of the BWC footage, the investigation revealed the focus officer said to the complainant, "If you ball your frickin' fist at me again, I will drop you. Do you effing hear me? Get your effing finger out of my face and shut the F up." Those statements to the complainant by the officer is a violation of CPD policies and procedures. After review of the BWC footage, the investigation revealed that a witness officer said to the complainant, "Give me your effing arm," while assisting the focus officer. This is a statement of the complainant by the officer as a violation of CPD policies and procedures. So the conclusion as to allegation 1, Officer D, the complaint alleges that on June 22nd, 2023, while he was in the vehicle, officers arrived, pulled him out, and threw him to the ground. The investigation revealed officers ordered the complainant to get out of the truck based on the information received from the police helicopter that suspects the officers were pursuing were leaving in a truck. Based on this information, Officer D observed the complainant in the truck, the officers ordered the complainant to get out of the truck and the police helicopter above. The complainant did not comply. Officer D approached the vehicle and used a level 1 use of force technique to remove the complainant from the vehicle and physically placed him to the ground. The officer's actions did not violate CPD policies, procedures, and/or laws. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 1 be closed with the finding of exonerated against the officer. Allegation 2, the complainant alleged 5 units hit his vehicle, causing damage by pushing his vehicle into his neighbor's garage, breaking the door. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that allegation 2 be closed with a finding of unfounded. We have 2 DIG allegations. DIG allegation 1, Officer D, a review of BWC footage revealed that Officer D said to the complainant, "If you ball your effing fist up at me again, I will drop you. Do you effing hear me? Get your effing finger out of my face and shut the F up." These statements to the complainant by the officer violated CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended a finding of sustained misconduct against the officer. This is DIG finding number 2, Officer A. A review of BWC footage revealed that Officer A said to the complainant, "Give me your effing arm," while assisting the focus officer. This statement to the complainant by Officer A violated CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended that a finding of sustained misconduct be filed against the Officer A. and our committee has reviewed this report, and I move to accept the findings to the GIG.
Dr. Ford, could we have those as two separate motions, the original allegations that were contained in the complaint, and then separate a motion on the IGs
Sure, okay.
added?
So, do you want me to restate this?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
So our first motion would be for allegation 1, Officer D. The complainant alleges on June 22nd, while he's in his vehicle, officers arrived, pulled him out, threw him to the ground. Investigation revealed officers or the...
You can just say it as
Okay,
motion.
okay, motion
yeah.
for allegation 1, allegation
Yep.
2.
Yep.
I move for, accept the findings of the IG.
Great. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
And now for DIG allegation 1 and DIG allegation 2, I move for acceptance of the findings of the DIG.
Perfect. May I have a second? Second. Okay. So we've got opens, two separate motions on that case. Thank you.
And the last one of our cases here on hold, this was case number 2023-0890. Summary: on July 3rd, 2023, City of Columbus Department Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct. The complainant alleged an officer put a child face down on the porch while 5 officers were kneeled on his back for 15 minutes. Also, officers handcuffed and hogtied the child because he was kicking, and then an officer grabbed the child's neck and smacked his face in the back seat of the car. After a review of the body-worn camera and interviews of the officers involved in the investigation, found no evidence of an officer putting the child face down the porch while 5 officers were kneeling on his back for 15 minutes. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded. After a review of body-worn camera, a review of the use of force report, interviews of the officers involved, and a review of the Columbus Police Department policy, the investigation found no evidence the child was handcuffed and hogtied because he kicks. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded. The officers actually hobbled the child, which may have been perceived as hogtied by the complainant. As it pertains to the allegation, the officer grabbed the child's neck and smacked his face in the backseat of the car. After review of the body-worn camera, the use of force report, and interviews of officers, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated that allegation. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed as unfounded. So, conclusion, allegation number 1, Officer M, Officer A, and Officer J. The complainant alleged an officer put the minor face down on the front porch while 5 officers kneeled on his back for 15 minutes. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated this allegation. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation against the officers be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation number 2, Officers M, Officer A, and Officer J. The complainant alleged officers handcuffed and hogtied the minor child because he was kicking. Based on the evidence and information obtained, the investigation revealed officers did handcuff and hobble strap the minor child. The investigation found the actions taken by the officers were supported by CPC policy and procedure. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation against the officers be closed, the finding unfounded, as the officers did not hogtie the minor child. And allegation number 3, against Officer M, Officer A, and Officer J, the complainant alleged that an officer grabbed the minor child's neck and smacked his face in the backseat of the car. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence that substantiated this allegation. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation against the officers be closed, the finding of unfounded. And I have one DIG allegation too, so I make that a separate? Okay. So for the first 3 allegations, our committee reviewed these, and I move to accept the findings of the DIG.
May I have a second, please? Any questions? Or,
have a question?
yes.
I may have missed the age of the child. How old was the child?
I'm not sure we have that.
And my second question would be, what is hobble?
Yeah, I was curious about that as well.
I can only speak to what I know. Maybe someone else has more knowledge. I believe it's a restraint around the ankles. With like a belt-like device around the ankles. They can't kick.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, okay.
But the hands and feet aren't
It's not a hog tie,
together.
right?
Yeah.
What kind of restraint is it? Do we know?
It's like you mean the material of the
Yeah,
restraint?
yeah, like,
It's a belt-like strap.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Officer Younger, I don't believe I see the age in here.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Okay.
So I have a question as well. So would that have changed the outcome of the investigation? Because it says the officers acted within policy, I guess, because it was the hobble tie, not the hog tie. So would that have changed it if it was a hog tie?
So when we look at any investigation, what we do is we look at the actions of the officers. And so therefore, the actions of the officers as to how they restrained this individual and the explanation for why they restrained the individual was within policy and procedure. If we had found, in fact, that the officers restrained the person, let's say it was a hog tie and not a hobble, or they restrained that individual in any matter in which it was a violation of policy and procedure, we would have noted in our report that it was a violation of policy and procedure.
And was there any particular reason why the age was not included in the report?
I would have to actually look at the report and kind of look more definite into it to find out if the age was noted, why it was not noted. At this point, I don't know. Sometimes what happens is we get complaints. We always reach out to the complainant to get information. Sometimes complainants don't return our call. There's no follow-up. I don't know. I would have to actually look in there. But even if we're not able to make a determination based on the age, we still would have looked at were the actions of the officers within policy and procedure. And I can tell you, if age was a factor, meaning the policy stated that based on the age you're able to do this and not do this, then the age would have been noted and we would have noted that in the policy. But right now, I just don't know because I haven't had a chance to look at to see if in fact that occurred.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, the individual was 12 years old, was noted in the CAD report.
Thank you, Inspector General. All right, may I have a second?
Second.
Thanks. Any other questions? All right, and Dr. Ford, you mentioned there was,
Just so we have the last is the DAJ allegation, Officer M. The BWC reviewed, provided evidence that Officer M used profanity towards the father of the child, as this is being a violation of CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, has recommended this allegation be closed as sustained. And our committee reviewed this as well, and I move that we accept the findings of the DAG.
Second.
any questions about that? Okay, so we have open motions and seconds. I'm going to go through these just one at a time in the event that anyone has any abstentions or opposition. Case number 22-0441, that is the Dollar General case. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor of accepting the recommendations as made, please raise your hands. All right, any opposition? Any abstention? Okay. Case number 23-0816, this was the call for service and allegation of excessive use of force. The committee motioned and seconded to accept the recommendations as made. All in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, no oppositions, no abstentions. Case number 23-0819, this was the traffic stop with the allegation of the officer pulling over a car due to how it looked. The Subcommittee accepted and recommended to accept the recommendations as made. It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor of accepting, please raise your hands. All right, no opposition, no abstentions. Motion carries. Case number 23-0879. This is also an excessive use of force case, and on this one, we have two motions. We have originally a motion to accept all the findings of the Inspector General as given. If you agree, please raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to ask you to repeat that.
Okay, this was the excessive use of force, the allegation that the car unit damaged the neighbor's door when when they responded, traffic crash reporting showing that the complaint was backing up, but the complainant ran into the neighbor's door. Okay, so we have one, was that the opposition or abstention? Sorry. Abstention, thank you. And then second, related to this was the additional Inspector General allegations that were sustained. The subcommittee recommended accepting those allegations. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hands. And opposition, abstention. Thank you. All right, last case number 23-0890. It's been motioned and seconded on the original complaint to accept the IG's recommendations. All in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, any opposition? Any abstentions? And then lastly, the DIG had additional allegations for the officer's use of profanity. That was found to be sustained. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, no abstentions, no opposition. All those motions carry. Thank you, subcommittee. All right, next I'll turn it over to Pastor Nathan for his subcommittee's report outs.
Right. This is case number 2023-1064. The complainant alleged that two CPD officers pushed, shoved, and grabbed him by the throat when they misidentified him as the suspect when serving a warrant for several out-of-state sexual offenses. The officers, in fact, did misidentify him. They were sent to the wrong address, and apparently the way that the garages in the back of this building were set up, they went to the wrong garage. Unfortunately, as well, neither officer activated their body-worn camera. Both officers denied using any force. They denied pushing, shoving, or grabbing the complainant by the throat. They claimed the complainant was cooperative, showed him the driver's license, and when they realized their mistake, they apologized. Both said the encounter took about a minute. Complainant didn't seem upset. The IG found that the officers, regarding the wrongful use of force, there was a finding of unfounded concerning both officers. We did have a question that I thought we sent to the IG, and I don't recall receiving a response. I don't know if you received it or not, Ms. Hendricks, but the question had to do with how you decided that the allegation was unfounded, given that there was an absence of body-worn camera evidence. Did you receive that question ahead of time?
That's what we're trying to make a determination
Because
whether or not
we
we
had
received
asked
it.
and emailed it last week.
Brock sent the questions after attending your subcommittee meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
When was the subcommittee? Last Thursday, so that would have been on the 4th. So I'm not sure. We would probably have to check to see if we, from what I'm hearing, it seems like we did get the questions. We did answer them. Did we forward them? Okay. So I must apologize. It looks like the questions were answered and they were forwarded to me. I did not forward them to the board. So what was the question? The first question
Well-
was, how did we make a determination as to whether or not an allegation is unfounded?
Yeah, in as much as there was no body-worn camera evidence and we had competing stories, I didn't know how you determined how to adjudicate between the two stories.
So when we do look at, when we have an allegation and we try to make a determination as to whether or not the allegation occurred, if there is no information, so there is no statements, and so the statements need to be by parties that are impartial. So you can't use a statement, for example, if the complainant and the complainant had somebody else with him and statements was consistent, and then you're reviewing the statements from the officers, and both of the officers' statements are consistent, because of the fact that there is no impartial party. So it's hard to make a determination as to whether or not an incident occurred. So there was no evidence to really substantiate what the complainant's allegation was. And that was the reason why, in this case, we found that it was unfounded, because there was not enough information nor evidence provided for us to make a determination that it occurred. or
But
the
in this
incident.
case, the officers violated their affirmative duty to turn on their body-worn cameras.
Right, and we did sustain that
I
in the
understand,
case.
but the evidence that would have been there was denied to the complainant because the officers didn't fulfill their responsibility.
And so, again, in this case, we did find that the officers should have had their body cam on. And because they did not have their body cam on, we did sustain them for that. But that would be the same as any cases that we have gotten, numerous cases in which we have allegations that are made against someone.
I
and
guess
don't-
what I'm,
Nathan is,
Yeah.
or what Pastor Nathan is, he's looking for more information on the burden of proof. And we had an extensive conversation about this during our subcommittee meeting. And specifically, what he is questioning is, should the burden of proof then switch to the officers because they did not do their due diligence of cutting on the body camera? So basically, it is then up to them to disprove the allegation from the complainant simply because they denied the opportunity to even have evidence by not turning on their body camera. So we're trying to get some clarification in terms of that.
and just to push this just a little bit to, beyond the present circumstance, but let's say we had an allegation of significant abuse, and the officers just violated their affirmative duty to turn on the body-worn camera. And so you only had the complainant who is saying that, I was knocked to the ground, I was kicked, whatever, I was choked, but we have no body-worn camera, and the officer denies it. So yes, the officer, according to your analysis, would be, there would be a recommendation for discipline because they didn't turn on the body-worn camera, but any of the abuse, I'm just for the sake of argument assuming that that happened, would be unaddressed.
I'm going to also look into some more of the information, so I apologize. I will make sure that we forward this to you. But also, during the investigation, the investigator reached out to the caller in an attempt to get additional information and clarity on the information they provided. And the caller was uncooperative with being able to provide additional information to
Well, I mean,
the
if the caller is in a garage alone, the caller wouldn't have any additional information. I mean, what would the caller be able to come up with? I mean, he didn't have a video, there wouldn't be anything else that the complainant would be able to come up with. I'm just wondering about this kind of, the policy that says that when an officer doesn't turn on their body-worn camera, and
If I could maybe interject, I think this is a good conversation for the end of our meeting because I think it also brings questions up about what's the typical process in IAB when this happens? What part of this may be covered under the FOP contract, i.e. is there discipline that can be attached when the evidence that would have shown what happened isn't there because the BWCs weren't turned on? Is your subcommittee okay if we not vote on this case, but save a discussion for the end and then withhold voting? Okay, thank you.
thank you. This is case 2023-1164. The complainant alleges he was pulled over in a traffic stop for no reason. An officer told him to shut up when he was asked why he was pulled over. was removed from his car, handcuffed. Then a second officer accused him of trying to grab his taser after he was handcuffed. And he was told he was not to touch his effing taser, and if the complainant did that, he would be put on the effing ground. All of the complainant's allegations were sustained from the evidence obtained from the body-worn camera. Allegation 1 against Officer 1, there was not a justified basis for conducting the traffic stop, and in fact, the evidence points to a concocted reason for the stop after the fact, and this was based upon the body-worn camera evidence. They came up with a reason to stop him and then shut their body-worn cameras off to discuss it for a half an hour and then turn them back on. Allegation 2 against Officer 1 suggests bias-based profiling. That was also sustained. And there were 2 allegations against Officer number 2 for the use of profanity and unprofessional conduct, which were also sustained. So we move to accept the IG's findings regarding allegation 1, that is sustained because of the wrongful stop. Allegation 2, that's sustained for bias-based profiling, and 2 allegations regarding the use of, that were sustained for the use of profanity and unprofessional conduct.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay. And were all of those the original allegations, or were any of them added on by the IG?
No.
Okay. Okay. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Into your next case, please.
2023-1328, the complainant alleged that CPD showed up at her home, placed her son in handcuffs, illegally searched her home without a search warrant. The CPD did show up at her home and did place her son in handcuffs. They did not open any drawers. They did a physical inspection. Apparently, they were sent to the wrong address again, as in our first case, when somebody called to report a burglary was in progress, and a statement that an Asian woman and her children were being held inside the home. The DIG concluded that the officer acted in accordance with CPD policies and recommended exoneration regarding the allegation of wrongful detention of the 29-year-old son and exoneration regarding the illegal search. We concurred with the IG findings, and so I move to accept the IG's findings regarding exoneration on wrongful detention and exoneration on illegal search.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? No. Seeing none.
This is case 2023-1344. The complainant got in a fight with his brother. CPD was called. The complainant alleged the excessive use of force by the officer. Body-worn camera evidence shows that the officer did not issue any verbal commands to the complainant, nor did the complainant resist, initially resist. Rather, when contact was first made, the officer pulled the complainant down the stairs. The use of force was not supported by CPD policies and procedures. And so regarding the excessive use of force, the IG sustained a finding of that, pulling the complainant down the stairs without a verbal command. And there was a second allegation. When they came to the bottom of the stairs, the complainant did resist, turning around after multiple commands to do so. He told the officer to F off. The officer then took the complainant to the ground. The use of force in this case was appropriate, and so the IG found the allegation of the excessive use of force regarding the second allegation that took place at the bottom of the stairs to be unfounded. We concur with both of the IG's findings of sustained regarding excessive use of force at the top of the stairs and unfounded regarding excessive use of force at the bottom of the stairs. And so I move to accept the Inspector General's findings.
may I have a second? Thank you. Any questions? Okay,
Case 2023-1472, the CPD officers were called to assist on a building maintenance case. Workers were trying to get into an apartment to fix a water leak. The complainant stood in the apartment doorway and proceeded to complain to the officers about the apartment building. The officer stated that that was a civil matter, that he needed to get out of the way for the workers. He refused. An officer told him to stop acting like a moron. This statement was a violation of CPD policies regarding good conduct, and I move to accept the Inspector General's finding of sustained regarding the officer's statement as being a violation of CPD policies regarding good conduct.
okay, we have a second. Any questions? No?
2023-1480, the complainant alleged that an officer made sexual contact with her by reaching inside of her underwear and touching her private parts during a pat-down following a traffic stop. In this case, there was a traffic stop. The passenger was known to officers to carry drugs and weapons. Both complainant and the passengers were asked to exit the vehicle. A weapon was found in the vehicle. The complainant was patted down. However, there's no evidence to suggest inappropriate sexual contact during the pat-down. The DIG concluded that the allegation was unfounded. We concurred, and so I move to accept the Inspector General's finding of unfounded regarding sexual contact of the complainant.
There's a second. Any questions?
Did that one have BWC?
This one had, yes.
Any other questions? Okay. And that concludes, that's all of your cases?
Yes.
Okay. We'll reserve voting on 23-1064, but we've got open motions on case numbers 23-1164, 23-1328, 23-1344, 23-1472, and 23-1480, all of which comes with a motion to accept the recommendations as given. We've got open seconds on all of them. To vote yes and accept all of them as given, please raise your hands. All right, no abstentions or oppositions on any of those. All right, and we'll reserve 23-1064 for the end of our discussion. Now, going out of order to give Mac's group a chance, I will turn it over to Mac for Team 3.
All right, Mary, go first.
All right. Case number 2023-0950. On July 10th, 2023, the Columbus DIG received an allegation of excessive use of force from the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, Division Court of Domestic Relations, and Juvenile Branch on behalf of a juvenile who was being held at their facility. The complaint alleges that the officers who arrested him used excessive force, further stating that he complied with the officer's orders, but the listed officer forced him to the ground, and another officer forced their knee into his back and neck. The DIG investigation consisted of administrative review of the use of force conducted by the officer's sergeant, review of the CAD report, review of BWC. The Columbus DIG concurs with the findings of the sergeant's review that the use of force was within policy. Therefore, it is recommended that this complaint be closed as an administrative closure. The conclusion, there are two allegations. As to allegation number 1, Officer H forced Mr. H to the ground even though he complied with the officer's commands. Based on the evidence reviewed, the DIG concluded that Mr. H did not comply with Officer H's instructions, and the complainant's allegation is unfounded. Officer H's use of force was within policy. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as an administrative closure. As to allegation number 2, this is an unknown officer. The unknown officer put his knee into Mr. Harris's back and neck. Officer H appears to be from the BWC. He was the only officer, and this was addressed in allegation number 1, but Officer H from allegation number 1 appears to be the only officer with his knee on the back of Mr. Harris to gain compliance, and he used techniques that were within the division policy to gain compliance by using pressure points through the complainant's jaw. No other officers on the BWC were seen with a knee in Mr. Harris's neck or back as alleged by the complainant. Therefore, this allegation would be unfounded. It is recommended that this allegation be also an administrative closure since there was a non-involved CPD officer. Our review committee reviewed this. We agreed with the DIG, and at this time, we moved to accept the findings of the DIG.
Any seconds? Any questions?
Case number 2, 2023-0972. On July 12, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of the Inspector General alleging misconduct by Columbus police officer. The complainant was arrested by officers on June 18, 2023, and his personal property was removed from his possession while he was in police custody. A single item of the complainant's property became lost and unaccounted for during the arrest and the transport. The DIG's investigation consisted of BWC, CVS data, CAD information, Columbus Police Property Inventory Record, Franklin County Sheriff's Department inmate property information, and in-person interviews of the officers having direct involvement in the arrest, identification processing, and prisoner transport. All of this information was reviewed. As it pertains to the allegation that an officer was responsible for the loss of the complainant's personal property, the investigation confirmed this allegation. It is recommended that the allegation against one officer be closed as sustained. The investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation, and the matter violated CBD policies, procedures, and/or the law. It is further recommended the allegation against 2 additional officers involved be closed as unfounded. The investigation did not find evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation against them. So here we have one allegation as it relates to 3 different officers. As for allegation number 1, Officer 1, the complainant alleged his property, and this was a diamond/gold grill mouthpiece, was lost by Officer M. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. The review of Officer S's that's his last name. Officer S's BWC data showed him removing a grill mouthpiece from the left front pant pocket of the complainant during the search incident to arrest. The complainant's property could not be accounted for following this arrest. Identification, processing, and prisoner transport to the jail, despite Officer S's statement that he placed the grill mouthpiece in a paper bag with other property he removed during the search of the complainant. After review of all this, the investigation concludes that Officer S was negligent in his handling of the complainant's property, as the said property item was lost by unknown means during the arrest process. Officer S's mishandling of the complainant's property resulted in its loss in violation of CPD Rule of Conduct 1.03, violation of Rules or Division Directive Section A, which states that in part, division personnel shall not commit or omit acts in violation of explicit or implicit purpose of the rules of conduct, policies, directives, or orders of the division. Division personnel may be subject to disciplinary action for the loss or damage of property belonging to a suspect or a citizen due to negligence. It is recommended that this allegation against Officer S be closed with a finding of sustained due to his actions not being within CPD policy and property. CBD policy and the property becoming unaccounted for and lost following his actual handling of it. As to Officer C, and allegation 1, Officer C, let's see here, per the BWC, he did not have possession of the bag containing the property at all. It is recommended that Officer C be closed with unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence to substantiate that he had anything to do with the transport of that particular bag. As to Officer M, the third officer on the scene, based on BWC of Officer M, it indicated he did not handle the complainant's grill or mouthpiece at all. He had no direct contact with the complainant. He only aided in the transport. So as to this particular officer, it is also unfounded. Our committee reviewed this case. We concur with the DIG's finding, and we move to accept their finding at this time.
Any seconds?
Second.
Okay, any questions?
And then the third case, case number 2023-1117. On August 3rd, 2023, the complainants filed a complaint with the City of Columbus DIG alleging misconduct by Columbus Police. One of the complainants was a victim of a robbery that occurred on July 14th, 2023, when she was accosted by a suspect who used a firearm to commit the offense. The complainant's cell phone was stolen during the incident. Officers responsible for the preliminary investigation of the incident failed to act on real-time information regarding the active tracking of the complainant's cell phone. At the time of the police report, the complainant used a locator map on her computer to track the whereabouts of her cell phone. The complainants regarded the police response to this as improper as it pertained to protocol and procedure when investigating violent crime offenses. So the DIG investigated, and it consisted of the BWC data, a review of the CPD chain of command investigation package, telephone interviews of the complainant, and in-person interviews of the two officers involved. In regard to the allegation that officers did not properly conduct an investigation of the robbery offense, the investigation confirmed this allegation. It is recommended that that against allegation 1, Officer be closed as sustained. The investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation, and the matter violated CBD policies and procedures and/or law. It is further recommended that the allegation against the other officer be closed as unfounded. The investigation did not find any evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation against him. All right. So we have here two officers. Actually, one of them is a detective, not an officer. Oh, well, he's an officer, but he's a detective. So the conclusion, allegation number 1, Officer S. The complainant against Officer S that he conducted an improper investigation of a robbery incident. Based on the information and evidence, the investigation did not find evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. Review of BWC data for Officer S indicated he completed a police report for the incident to which he was dispatched to investigate. He was the officer on the scene, and that was his responsibility was simply to complete the report. Officer S made the required notification to the robbery unit to advise that a robbery incident occurred. As a patrol officer, the response to the robbery incident was consistent with CPD policy. It is recommended that this allegation against Officer S be closed with a finding of unfounded, as the investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. As to the second detective on the scene, Detective N, the complainant's allegation as to Detective N that he conducted an improper investigation of a violent crime incident of a robbery victim This is a little different here. Based on information and evidence obtained, the investigation found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation. As a detective assigned to the robbery unit, the detective was required to respond to a crime scene or a victim's location upon notification that the robbery incident involved the use of a firearm. This detective stated he did not respond after receiving notification from this officer about the robbery incident. So the detective was interviewed personally, and he admitted that he did not respond. The investigation concluded that this detective was in violation of CPD Rules of Conduct 1.03, violation of the Division Directive Section A, which states that division personnel shall not commit or omit acts in violation of the explicit or implicit purposes of the rules of conduct, policies, and directives as it pertains to email dated November 23rd, 2022. The email specified the response policy for all sworn personnel assigned to the robbery unit and directed detectives to respond to all scenes for any incident involving an allegation that a weapon was implied, brandished, used, or threatened to be used during the course of an incident. In addition, the email instructed detectives to respond to any incident involving stolen property being actively tracked by a victim. So here there was a double one. There was a firearm used and a tracking device, and he admitted during his interview that he did not go. It is recommended that this allegation against Detective S be closed with a finding of sustained due to the officer's actions not being within CPD policy, as his failure to respond to the robbery incident was in violation of robbery unit standard operation procedures. Our committee reviewed this. We agree with the findings of the IG as to both officers, one detective, one officer, and at this time, we move to accept the findings of the Department of the Inspector General as to the fine job that they did. Thank you.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay.
Case number 2023-1375. On September 11th, 2023, the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct via the hotline. The complainant alleged the police officer did not evaluate her call for service fairly. Specifically, the complainant claims that the officer referred to her call for service as silly. Also, the complainant alleged she was discriminated against because of her attire. The complainant alleged the officer did not take the appropriate action and provide due diligence to protect her family. The investigation consisted of the review of the body-worn camera of the focus officer, an interview with the complainant, a review of police directives as it pertains to the complainant's allegation. The investigation revealed the officer referred to the incident as silly, but further explained to the complainant it appeared to be a miscommunication, as the neighbor's child is only 3 years old and attempted to ride the complainant's daughter's bike. The officer's response and demeanor was not observed to be rude or discourteous and did not violate any police directive. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as exonerated. As it pertains to the allegation the officer discriminated against the complainant due to her attire, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed as unfounded. As it pertains to the allegation that the officer did not take appropriate action to protect her family, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. The actions taken by the officer are supported by CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, it is recommended the allegation be closed as unfounded.
Second.
Okay. I was going to,
Oh, you got more?
yeah, I got a little bit
All right.
a little bit more, but I'm with you. So the conclusion, the complainant alleged police officer did not evaluate her call for service fairly. The officer referred to her call for service as silly. Based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation revealed that the officer did make a statement that the incident appears silly as the matter is over a bike. He immediately clarified his statement to the complainant by explaining that he did not mean her call for assistance was silly. He explained it appeared to be a miscommunication as the neighbor's child is only 3 years old and attempted to ride the neighbor's bike. Columbus DIG concludes the officer's response and explanation to the complainant was not rude or discourteous and did not violate CPD policies and procedures and/or laws. So it is recommended this allegation be closed as exonerated. Allegation number 2, complainant alleged she was discriminated against because of her attire based on the information and evidence obtained. The investigation found no evidence to corroborate this allegation by the complainant. DIG recommends this allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. And allegation number 3, the complainant alleges officers did not take appropriate action or provide due diligence to protect her family. Based on the information and the evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence to corroborate this allegation by the complainant. The investigation revealed the actions taken by the officer were supported by CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation against the officer be closed as unfounded. Our subcommittee agreed with the IG's findings, and I motion that this board also agrees with the findings of the IG.
May I have a second? Second. Any questions? No? Okay.
Case number 2023-1454. On September 26, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department of Inspector General alleging excessive force by Columbus police officers. The complaint alleged the officers used excessive force on him on September 6, 2023. The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera footage, officers' interviews, a complainant interview, review of the use of force reports of involved officers, and a review of Columbus Division of Police Division directives. The investigation found the officers in questions were not in violation of any policy or procedure. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends the allegation against the officers be closed as unfounded, as there is no evidence to suggest the officers used excessive force. Additionally, the investigation found the force used by officers involved was within policy and appropriate for the incident that occurred on September 6, 2023. Conclusion, allegation number 1, complainant alleges officers used excessive force on September 6, 2023, and based on the information and evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Both of the officers' actions taken during this incident were not in violation of any Columbus Police Department policy. Therefore, DIG recommends this allegation against the officers be closed as unfounded. Our subcommittee agreed with those findings, and I motion that this board agrees with the findings of the IG.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, so we have pending motions and seconds on case numbers 2023-0950, 2023-0972, 2023-1117, 2023-1375, and 2023-1454. All in favor of accepting those as given, please raise your hand. Any opposition to any of those? All right, motions carry. All right, we're going to turn it back over, I assume, to Dr. Ford for your committee's last case readouts.
This is case number 2023-0372. On March 30th, 2023, the Department of Inspector General received a complaint of police misconduct via the Columbus DIG hotline. The complainant alleged he made a call for assistance to 911, was told that officers would be dispatched. However, no officers ever arrived. The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera video, computer-aided dispatch, and a unit history. The investigation revealed the initial officers dispatched to this police run were called off by the dispatcher, as there were two other officers who responded first to the scene and were already on the scene. Therefore, it is recommended this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded, as officers did respond to this incident. Conclusion, allegation number one, Officer A and Officer W. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that assistance was never provided or that officers didn't respond to the police run. A review of the PWC of Officers M and Officers D, who arrived on the scene first, revealed officers did respond to the scene. The officers made contact with the young man and assisted with ultimately getting him dropped off at his grandmother's house. Because Officers M and Officers D had already responded and handled the matter, the dispatcher canceled Officers A and Officers W being dispatched to the scene. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Our subcommittee has reviewed the case and agreed with the findings of the DIG and ask for your approval.
Okay, can you form that
Move.
motion?
And would move for approval.
Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Any questions? Okay. Go ahead.
The next complaint is complaint number 2023-1261. On August 28th, 2023, the Department of Inspector General received a complaint of police misconduct via the Columbus Division of Police Internal Affairs Bureau. The complaint, Newark Police Department advised CPD that an officer may have run a license plate number in the Ohio Law Enforcement Gateway and provided information to a friend of the officer. The Columbus DIG's investigation consists of a review of documentation received from IAB, documentation received from Newark Police Department, and an interview with the officer. The investigation revealed the officer received the license plate number via text and was asked to provide information on the vehicle. The officer stated due to how the vehicle appeared in the photo received, he did believe it was stolen and ran the plates through AccuRent to provide information regarding the vehicle. As it is against CPD policies and procedures to run information for personal purposes, including through AccuRent, the DIG recommends a finding of sustained for the DIG allegation. As the complaint indicated that the officer ran the license plate number through the Ohio Law Enforcement Gateway, which he did not, it is recommended the initial allegation be closed as unfounded. Conclusion, allegation number one against Officer B. The complainant, Newark Police Department, advised the Columbus Division of Police that an officer may have run a license plate number in OLEG and provided information to a friend of the officer. The investigation revealed the officer received the license plate via text and was asked to provide information on the vehicle. The officer stated due to how the vehicle appeared in the photo received, he did believe it was stolen and ran the plates through AccuRent to provide information regarding the vehicle. The complaint indicated the officer ran the license plate through OLEG, which he did not. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends the initial allegation be closed as unfounded. I will also have a DIG allegation after this, but for this part, our subcommittee reviewed this case, and we agree with the DIG and move to accept the findings.
I'm sorry, I'm not following the fact pattern.
It sounds like he ran a plate not through OLEG, but through a different thing. I'm assuming your second motion is going to be an IG-initiated
Right.
sustained for running it through that second
Correct.
search feature. So the allegation was malfeasance because the officer ran a plate for personal purposes through a law enforcement search. The original allegation was OLEG. Turns out what he ran it through was AccuRent, which is a different device. So we have unfounded on OLEG, but an IG-initiated sustained complaint on running through AccuRent, which he's not allowed to do.
Correct.
Okay.
And the reason he ran it, what was the request made by?
The Newark Police Department.
And that is a violation of policy to cooperate with another police department, or what? I'm just confused by what the violation of policy is.
The violation of policy was using the search engine, law enforcement search engine, for personal purposes.
I heard that, but I'm just, what is the personal purpose? Maybe I just missed this. I missed the thread of the story.
It was the brother-in-law of the officer was trying to
But the brother-in-law worked for the Newark Police Department?
No, I can just provide
I'm
just,
sorry,
if
I
this
just got
helps a little
confused.
bit. So, no, the complaint came from the Newark Police Department. It came to us through there. But the officer ran the plate for a friend, and the friend was not in law enforcement.
Oh,
So, yeah,
oh, all right.
yeah.
Okay, so we have an open motion on the first allegation, which was found to be unfounded, that an officer improperly ran a plate through Oleg. Second, thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, and then Dr. Ford, I think you're going to
Okay.
make your second.
This will probably make it more clear. This is a DIG allegation against Officer B. The investigation revealed the officer reviewed the license plate via text and was asked to provide information on the vehicle. The officer stated due to how the vehicle appeared in the photo received, he did believe it was stolen and ran the plates through Accurant to provide information regarding the vehicle. It is against CPD policies and procedures to run information for personal purposes, including through Accurant. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends the finding is sustained for the DIG allegation. And our subcommittee also reviewed this and agreed with the DIG and moved to accept the findings for the DIG.
Okay, thank you. Any question? Okay.
This is complaint 2023-1363. On September 11th, 2023, the complainant filed a complaint with the City of Columbus Department Inspector General alleging policeman misconduct, use of force by a Columbus Division of Police officer. The complainant alleged on September 9th, 2023, around 2:30 a.m., number one, a CPD officer put her in handcuffs, slammed her face into the gate outside her apartment complex, and number two, then slammed her face into the ground, busting her lip. The investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera footage, computer dispatch report, use of force report, photos submitted by the complainant, ring door bell footage, and interviews with the complainant, the CPD focus officers, and a CPD witness officer. The investigation revealed that a use of force did occur, and it was not excessive as it within CPD policy and procedures. An additional allegation was noted by the Columbus DIG when the officer used profanity. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends that allegations 1 and 2 be closed as unfounded, and the DIG allegation be closed as sustained. Conclusion. Allegation number 1, Officer C. The complainant alleged that a CPD officer put her in handcuffs and slammed her face against the gate of an apartment complex. The investigation revealed the officer was observed grabbing the complainant by her left wrist and pushed her by her left shoulder into the gate to effect an arrest. In the course of doing this, her face hit the stair railing, which was referred to by the complainant as the gate. The complainant was not in handcuffs as she was not complying with the officer's commands to place her hands behind her back so that handcuffs could be placed upon her. There is no evidence that the officer put the complainant in handcuffs or slammed her face against the gate as alleged by the complainant. Also, the officer's actions taken during this incident were within CPD policy and procedure and not considered to be excessive. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation be closed with a finding of unfounded. Allegation number 2, Officer C. The complainant alleged the CPD officer slammed her face against the ground, resulting in her lip being busted along with abrasions and swelling to her left cheek, bone, and left eye. The investigation revealed the officer used force in the form of a leg sweep to ground the complainant as the complainant was actively resisting the officer when attempting to place her in handcuffs. The force used by the officer did result in the complainant hitting her face on the cement, causing injuries to her face. Medics responded to the scene and treated the complainant. The officer's actions were within CPD policy and procedure and not considered to be excessive. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation be closed with a finding when founded. I also will have a DIG allegation after this, but our subcommittee reviewed this report and agreed to the findings, and I move to accept the findings of the DIG.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any questions?
Okay, the next, this is the DIG allegation against Officer C. A review of the BWC footage provided evidence that Officer C is heard using profanity towards the complainant, saying she is being effing petty. This being a violation of CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation be closed as sustained. And our subcommittee also reviewed this complaint and agreed, and I move to accept the findings of the DIG.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Okay, this is complaint number 2023-1408. On September 18, 2023, Department Inspector General received a complaint of policeman conduct via the DIG hotline. The complainant alleged when officers came to speak with him while he was in the basement, an officer was caught on video saying, quote, "Get this crap cleaned off your lawn," unquote, and called them, quote, West Siders, unquote. The complainant stated the officer was out of line and there was no reason for him to make that statement. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of a review of body-worn camera video, computer-aided dispatch, unit history, interview with the complainant, and interview with the officer. The investigation revealed the officer, along with others, responded to a disturbance call, and when the officers arrived to speak to the complainant at his home, one officer can be heard making a comment about the appearance of the complainant's front yard and referred to them as West Siders. These statements are discourteous and rude in nature and in violation of Columbus Division of Police directives. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this case be closed with findings sustained for the officer. Conclusion. Allegation 1, Officer M. The complainant alleged that when officers came to speak with him while he was in the basement, an officer was caught on video saying, quote, get this crap cleaned off your lawn, end quote, and called them, quote, West Siders, end quote. The complainant stated the officer was out of line and there was no reason for them to make that statement. The investigation revealed the officer, along with others, responded to a disturbance call, and when the officers arrived to speak to the complainant at his home, one officer can be heard making a comment about the appearance of the complainant's front yard and referred to them as West Siders. As these statements are discourteous and rude in nature and was directed at the complainant's wife, this was being a violation of CPD directives. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this case be closed, the findings sustained for the officer. And our subcommittee has reviewed the findings and agreed, and I move for approval from the DIG.
Second, any questions? Okay.
This is DIG complaint number 2023-1465. On September 27, 2023, the Department Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct. The complainant alleged that a Columbus police officer stated there was nothing he could do and just got in his police cruiser and left when asked by Turkey Hill employees to help out with a hit-and-run accident that took place across the Turkey Hill at 1800 East Broad Street in Columbus, Ohio. After review of the evidence obtained, the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the alleged incident occurred or involved a CPD officer. Therefore, the DIG recommends this allegation be closed as an administrative closure. In conclusion, allegation number 1 is unknown. The complainant alleged that a Columbus police officer stated there was nothing he could do and just got in his police cruiser and left when asked by Turkey Hill employees to help out with a hit-and-run accident that took place across from the Turkey Hill at 1800 East Broad Street in Columbus, Ohio. The Columbus DIG recommends this allegation be closed as administrative closure, as the investigation found no evidence to substantiate the alleged incident occurred or involved a CPD officer. And our subcommittee has reviewed this case as well and agreed with the DIG findings and move for approval.
Okay. May I have a second? Any questions?
Lastly, this is DIG complaint number 2023-1511. On October 4th, 2023, the Columbus Department of Inspector General received a complaint of misconduct via the hotline. The complainant alleged the officer called him an asshole. The complainant stated that he does not find this to be professional or acceptable, as the complainant was doing what was requested of him by Columbus Police. The Columbus DIG completed a review of body-worn camera video, a review of the Columbus Division of Police policy, and an interview of the officer. The investigation found evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation against the officer be closed as sustained. The allegation against Officer B. The complainant alleged an officer referred to him as an asshole. The complainant stated he does not find this to be professional or acceptable. The information reviewed provided evidence that Officer B used profanity when referencing the complainant as an asshole. This action, also being unprofessional and not courteous when it is in violation of CPD policies and procedures. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends this allegation be closed as sustained. And our subcommittee has reviewed the report and agreed with the DIG and moved for accepting the findings.
Any second?
Second.
Any questions? Okay, so we've got open motions on case number 23-0372. We've got open motions on 23-1261, both the original allegations that were in the complaint along with additional IG allegations, all of which have been motioned and seconded to be accepted. The same for case number 23-1363. We've got moving for acceptance of the original complaint as well as additional allegations that were sustained by the IG. And we've also got case numbers 23-1408, 23-1465, and 23-1511. All in favor of accepting all of those as written, please raise your hands. Anyone oppose any of those? All right, those motions carry. We will take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back to have our discussion about the question on burden of proof shifting and the intersection between internal affairs and the FOP. We'll be back here at 3:37. Discussion. We'll note, IG Hendricks did forward me the answers to the questions from Board Member Nathan's team, so I forwarded those to you all via email in the event that you have a chance to look at it. It looks like for this first case we're about to turn back to a discussion on, one of the responses was that the statement given by both officers involved was in opposition to what the caller stated. Additional corroborative information was used to determine that the use of force that occurred in that case did not occur as alleged in the complaint, and also that the officer's holding of the caller's arm in the escort position is not a reportable use of force, and that's under policy 2-01. The caller subsequently was uncooperative with attempts of the IG's office to follow up initially, and they were not able to clarify any further information that was initially alleged in the complaint. That's why the allegation of the use of force was unfounded due to the preponderance of evidence against the officer. So that's at least the response to the question asked in 23-1064. Now turning to this question about burden of proof switching, I'd like to kind of open the floor. It looks like our question is, if BWC cameras are not turned on and there's an allegation that excessive use of force was utilized or some other misconduct happened during the period in which the cameras were turned off, how is it that a person, whether it is someone filing a complaint to the IG and our board, or in other instances, how does this work when this happens? Who's the burden of proof on in those circumstances? Go ahead, Mr. Tobias, yes.
So, I'm a little bit hesitant to offer too much of an opinion because Ms. Ross is counsel for the IG, and in terms of what information she may or may not have discussed with the IG in terms of reviewing complaints and conducting investigations. I can say fairly kind of generally, the type of work that they're conducting is kind of a quasi-judicial nature, and so normally in other settings that I work in, it's a preponderance standard. And ultimately, the board obviously gets to make final decisions as to whether to adopt or reject those findings. In terms of burden shifting, again, I'm hesitant to comment too much without talking with Ms. Ross first. I tried to text her, but I understand she's out of town. I don't believe that exists or that takes place, or should it take place. Most of these assessments, and IG, if I say anything that's out of turn or incorrect, you'll step in, please, is a totality of the circumstances assessment. You're basically gathering as much information, as many facts and circumstances as you can, specificity in regard to any particular situation or any complaint, and it's an assessment of the totality of the circumstances and whether we're getting to a preponderance standard. I will say, too, again, I don't have intimate familiarity like Ms. Ross does regarding discipline and FOP policy, but I will say that an officer's failure to activate body cam is probably one of the more serious allegations out there, and I would imagine that that's frowned upon by the police, and I think that the punishment that may be meted out, the discipline for that type of a violation might be more significant than other types of violations.
Does anyone know, whether it's Mr. Tobias or anyone else, does it work similar in Internal Affairs Bureau investigations as well? Like if there's an allegation that something occurred when a body-worn camera was turned off, is it sort of the same thing? We've got to tally the circumstances. It makes me feel like I'm in law school. My class starts tomorrow, which it actually does, my students. So does it work the same way in those instances?
Yeah, I'm thinking Mr. Furby's probably going to be in the best position to offer that type of information. I just don't have an understanding of the inner workings of IAB.
Okay, perfect, because he'll be here next month, so that's helpful. Anyone else have other questions about that?
The other thing that I'll add, not that it's exactly analogous to a jury, but juries get to decide, or a judge gets to decide what weight to assign to evidence, to testimony, to evidence. And so in a similar, not exactly the same, a similar fashion, as the IG and the inspectors are gathering evidence, gathering information, they're making determinations and assessments as to what weight to assign to any particular piece of information or evidence that they get based on any prejudice or bias, or I know the IG was talking earlier about whether it's a friend or a relative of the complainant. So they have discretion based on training and experience to assign weight to evidence and testimony based on the facts and circumstances.
Anyone else have any questions or thoughts about that specific issue?
Well, I remain concerned that, I don't know what a single complainant would be able to come up with unless there were, obvious injuries that, he went to the hospital and got photographs or a doctor's statement. I don't know what else, a complainant who alleges that he's been accosted in a garage and there was a wrongful use of force. We simply have two competing narratives. And so the officers denied the narrative. He alleges the narrative. I understand that he didn't tip the scale, but they have an affirmative duty to turn on their camera. And so I understand that's an independent, basis for discipline, but I just, they've denied him, I guess, I think of the, prosecutorial misconduct, that you've denied the person exculpatory evidence, and so as a result of that, does that person, is there anything that changes? So that's what it feels. It feels like he was denied the possibility of building a case.
In the example you gave with the exculpatory evidence, it could result in a mistrial. It
Yeah.
could result in sanctions against the prosecutor. The analogy that also I would give to be helpful is sometimes it's just the reality of the circumstances. When I was the director of intake, we handled complaints related to assaults and thefts at gas stations, at bars that had security cameras. But by the time the victim came in, filed a complaint with our office, weeks had gone by, and then our ability to access those videos, which would have been really probative and helpful for our assessments, were gone.
But they don't have an affirmative duty to
Correct.
to supply that. They're third party independent.
Sure.
But an officer has a legal duty to use the body worn camera. Failed to do so.
My point in mentioning that was to say that unfortunately, we're then stuck in a situation where we have to evaluate that case based on all the other evidence and
Right.
information that we have available to us.
Right.
And sometimes we want to file a criminal charge
Right.
against somebody, but we just don't have enough
No,
because
I'm-
that video's missing.
Yeah.
But in your instance, the point's well taken, and that's where there would be probably more meaningful sanctions for that type of violation.
The fact that there were two officers was particularly troubling. If it was one officer responding, and that negligence happens, it's human. Two officers failing to turn on their cameras independently was just troubling. Mary is asking.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, what troubles me is the same thing that troubles you, is with some of the police shootings. It's that an individual, when the body cam is not turned on versus when the body cam is on, an individual is denied a defense in court when you don't have that body cam. I mean, and we see that in the cases that are going to court now. And there's no way to get that back. Justice for that individual for that individual's family is totally denied. And so that's one of the biggest issues right there. So if an officer doesn't turn on the body cam, and I know we've discussed this before, pardon me, what are the consequences as far as the discipline within the police department? Is there anything at all, or is that?
So there's
so-
it's still the graduated sanctions. Like, there's not a separate category
Okay.
of sanction that exists for that infraction versus another. So it would still have to go through, and I can't give you the exact space, but the listed sanctions that officers are eligible to have, it still starts there.
Okay. Oh,
And-
I got you.
And now
I
whether
got you.
that,
Okay.
I don't know the specifics on what happens for an officer who maybe has done it multiple times, or kind of how that graduation takes place, but the discipline's the same. The options for discipline are the same or for other
Okay.
infractions.
So this would have to go through their contract in order to change it.
I mean, I think almost
is that-
everything.
Everything.
Yeah, and to that end, I would say this is a discussion that I think is worth us having as well when we think about, in the long term, where our recommendations go. That depends on if our recommendation is something that is specifically in the FOP contract. So this is a conversation Stephanie and I had this week, which is some of the things that we as a board have recommended are things that are specifically covered in the FOP contract, some policies and procedures that we say should or should not happen. And so to the extent that CPD can make those changes before the FOP contract is renegotiated, that can't happen. So the reality is, unfortunately, that some of the things that we might recommend as a board, to the extent that they deal with things that are covered by contract, we may not hear for a whole year because of the fact that it's part of contract negotiations. And because it's part of contract negotiations, it may not happen because those are the things that happen when the FOP contract is executed. So I do think it's worthwhile, maybe if we get not just a refresher, but when all the contract pieces for this most recent negotiation are complete, if we have Ms. Baker-Morrish come back in and talk to everybody about what changes there are, what's new, what's not, that sort of thing. Or Ms. Ross, whoever would like to talk FOP contract with us.
Well, and in particular, if anything that we recommended actually was offered in the contract negotiation, and if anything, was accepted.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, is that contract negotiations are every year? 3 years, what's there, 3 years?
It's three,
Okay.
right? Yeah, every 3 years. And I think one had just been negotiated right before the board was created, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So given this discussion, are there thoughts on two things? One, do we want some sort of recommendation, or would the subcommittee like to move for a recommendation related to BWC's? I think we already have one. I'd have to go back and check into my, check the inbox because Stephanie sent out our list of what we've already recommended. And then separate from that, do we want to proceed on case number 23-1064?
Well, in terms of the IG's recommendation of discipline because of the failure to turn on the body-worn camera, we certainly concur with that recommendation. The next question is, would we make a further recommendation of a policy change in terms of switching the burden of proof, that because there was an affirmative duty to turn on the camera and the complainant is denied evidence. So we would concur with the Attorney General, the IG's, you just got a promotion, the Inspector General's recommendation of discipline because of the failure to turn on their body-worn camera. So we would concur with that.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah,
at
I would
least on
move
that?
to accept the IG's finding of a violation of policy regarding both officers for their failure to turn on their body-worn camera.
Okay, in case number 23-1064.
Yes.
May I have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor of accepting that recommendation, please raise your hand. Okay, no opposition, no abstentions. Okay, and then on to your other issue, I think, I don't know the right language to use. I think Mr. Tobias has said there's no burden of proof per se. And preponderance of the evidence is it's the lowest standard that exists. So I don't know what wording works the best, or if we want to ask Ms. Ross when she returns what her advice was on the case that could shed some light on what wording we might want to use if we want to make a recommendation under
I'd
that.
be happy to wait for Ms. Ross's, further input on this,
Okay.
but it does seem to me to be wanting in terms of simply saying that the only a discipline that's, in the offing is failure to turn on the body-worn camera when, we have real complaints, and we don't know what happened because the officers failed to do their duty.
So it looks like one of our first recommendations that was in addition to a report was in case number 2022-0477, where we specifically made an additional motion asking the chief of police and/or director of public safety to review policies related to BWC and make changes. So it looks like we do have this outstanding request about BWC cameras. But maybe it's possible to make a more specific recommendation when Ms. Ross returns. Looks like that's the only one we've got so far.
Yeah, well, the recommendation could be as straightforward as this is part of the totality of circumstances, and it's going to be weighed in as evidence of, potential guilt. That, we're going to weigh it against the officers.
Okay. Any other thoughts for the good of the order? Okay, if everyone would please draw your attention to the cases that are going to be assigned for January. They are already listed there in our minutes. Our next meeting will be February 6th, 2 p.m. in our regular hearing room. If no one has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You have a second? Second. All in favor, please raise your hands. So moved. Motion adjourned. Thank you all.